Good evening, everybody. So I'm going to talk about snook fishing. I'm sure everybody in this room loves snook fishing, but can't consistently catch them, which is very hard to do. So I'm going to go over a couple of things, and I do a little bit better with question and answering. That way I know what y'all want to talk about. So right now I'm going to start with beach fishing, because September, October, November, we tend to have a mullet run, which hasn't really happened yet, but the last few days we've had a good wave of mullet pushed down. We had, around September 1st, we had a pretty good wave pushed down. There was some around, then we had the hurricane that went by, created a big swell. They kind of left for 2 or 3 weeks until the last couple of days they started showing up. I saw a picture this morning of the inlet. One of my buddies was there, and the whole inlet was just out by the jetty was getting blown up, and then down by Bear Point this morning there was a bunch of bait getting blown up. So if first of all, if people don't like catch live bait, you can bring your cast net to the beach, catch your live mullet anywhere pretty much. But this time of year, if you go down the beach, find the schools of mullet, you'll find the snook, the tarpon, everything's in them. Some people don't like messing with live bait. So you can throw, this is a Yozuri fingerling, or you can throw a wind cheater. I like this fingerling better. The action of it is way better than a wind cheater. Probably the action, best plug I've ever used throwing a snook. It just dives so well, and it's that triangle shaped lip. Yozuri makes crystal minnows, 10 different other lip plugs. The action does not work like this one does. But this is my favorite plug. You can throw it in current, you can throw it on the beach. And when you're fishing the beach, a lot of people try to cast as far out as possible. You don't want to cast as far out as possible. You'll catch your jacks, your ladyfish, your bluefish. A lot of times the beach will have a trough right up and down the shoreline. You want to throw parallel to the beach and bring your bait back towards you on the beach. Most of the time the snook will be in that trough. Now, if you're anywhere and you see fish coming out of the water, throw it towards where the explosions are. But if they're not, on the beach you want to fish that trough. So this is a medium heavy rod, 5,000 reel, got 20-pound braid on it. Use a 40 or 50-pound leader. Some people like fluorocarbon, some people like regular. I'm personally not a fluorocarbon person for snook. I think regular mono is a little more abrasion resistant, because once you get a weak spot in it, fluorocarbon's so stiff, it tends to break a little bit easier. With that being said, I'll pass this around, and if people can watch, the fans are on, or if we have a switch to turn them off, please. So, but I'll pass this around. And you can throw, when you go to the beach, you can throw pretty much any plug, whatever you have confidence in, and I think that's 90% of the game. I mean, you could ask 10 people what their favorite plug is to throw, and probably 7 of them will give you a different answer. 3 of them will give you the same answer. So with any kind of fishing, if you have confidence in something, that's what you want to fish, and that's what you want to throw. Your other option is, this time of year, if you go to the beach or catch some live mullet, I like using like a 4.0 hook, 50-pound mono leader, and just like a 1/4 ounce lead. About a 2-foot leader, let the lead slide up and down, and what that does, especially if you're at the beach. Can everybody hear me without the microphone? So especially if you're at the beach, it's not real deep, but when you have that little 1/4 ounce lead on and your mullet's up here swimming around, this lead's usually on the bottom, and this lead will hold your bait down below most of the other ones. And usually this time of year when there's mullet on the beach, there's just 10 million of them usually. And you can sit there for hours and hours and watch fish come out of the water and maybe get a bite, maybe not get a bite. It happens this time of year. But I use this is a 4/0 hook, 9175, 50-pound leader.
Circle or?
J hook. I don't like using circle hooks for snook, because snook tend to hit it so hard. Your first reaction is to come tight and lift up, and if you do that with a circle hook, most of the time you're going to miss that fish. Now, if you're one of those that can be really patient, when he hits you, just real tight, then you can get away with a circle hook. And everybody's gonna look at this and they're like, oh wow, you got mono on this. That's old school. Well, at the beach, I like fishing mono because a lot of times you're throwing it pretty much into the rocks sometimes. And with the braid and the waves, you hook a decent fish, he's gonna run right out along the rocks, whether you're at the South Jetty or North Jetty or Sebastian, pretty much right down the rocks. And when the waves come in, sometimes that fish will go into the rocks. If you do that with braid, as soon as you come tight with that braid, I don't care if you got 15 or 50 pound, you put a lot of pressure on that braid and rocks, it's gonna break real quick. So this is 20 pound mono and 50 pound leader, use about 2 or 3 feet. I'll pass this around. And yes, this is an old school pen because I weighed, and pen's probably one of the only reels, unless you wanna spend $800, $900 on a Van Staal, that you can wade at the beach or wade anywhere and drench it, and it will still work the next time you go to use it. Shimano's or Daiwas, I would recommend that. But this Penn SSB, you can sit, this thing's been drenched. I had my nephew last Sunday at the beach, he was hooking a mullet and set the rod in the water and the waves just breaking over it. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad it was a Penn, so it still worked. But I'll pass this one around.
And that weight's completely loose above your,
That weight is completely loose. That's why I use a swivel on this one, so the weight will slide up to the swivel.
oh, okay, similar to a Jupiter rig, but.
Yeah, similar to a Jupiter rig, and you can use no weight. Some people will use no weight if it's really calm, but when you're fishing the beach and stuff, you got a lot of the waves and everything, and that weight just helps it go down a little bit.
What about rod length?
Rod length, okay, so this rod is a little bit longer than I like the normal fish at the beach. My normal one is getting fixed. A couple guides got busted off, but this rod is 8.5 foot. So normally beach fishing, I like to use an 8-foot rod. I think you get a little bit better distance on casting, and I just like the 8-foot rod a little bit better. Sometimes you get a 7-foot rod, it's really short, won't cast, especially a lot of times you're fishing the beach or the jetty and the wind's blowing, and you want to get that little extra distance. A little bit longer rod will help do that. Do you have another question? No. Okay. Anybody have any questions so far?
Thank you.
And you can all,
Back to the plug, you like a diving plug better than like an NLB?
well, I haven't got to that yet. So, all right, so he brought it up. So, does everybody know what an NLBN is?
No live bait needed.
No live bait needed, okay. So, they came out, I might be wrong, but probably about 4 or 5 years ago maybe. And you can only buy them on their website when they first came out. And they had some very, very good advertising. So when they first came out, I thought it was a gimmick. We finally were able to get the 5 different colors that they would let us have. There were 5 general colors in the shop. And we would literally have kids come in and dump their piggy bank on the counter just to buy NLBNs. And it was just another swim bait, expensive swim bait. We sell a ton of swim baits. So one of my buddies, he can't catch a snook with a snook jig or anything else if he sat on it. Said, I'm only gonna bring in NLBNs and we're gonna fish them. I'm like, okay. So not last fall, the fall before, we fished NLBNs at the beach. We fished NLBNs everywhere. And they outfished every other swim bait 10 to 1. And it's the action of them. So they do work. Yes, if you go in there and look at them and say, oh man, this pack is $12 and I can buy the Z-Man for $7. It's worth spending the extra money on the NLBNs. But that being said, some people like throwing a swim bait better than a plug. I like throwing the plug better than the swim bait, especially if I'm at the beach, but I know you catch a lot of fish on NLBNs at the beach. He's standing there next to me with an NLBN and I'm throwing a mullet and he's catching them on his NLBN. So, which a plug or NLBN is a lot nicer than a mullet because you don't have to keep hooking them and you've got one, and unless something cuts you off, you're good. But the NLBNs do work.
What color?
What color? I like the chartreuse with the pearl belly. That's one of their 5 basic colors. Now, if you go to their website every Friday night at 7 o'clock, if you're one of those people that can sit on a computer on a Friday night at 7 o'clock, they always have a limited batch of colors come out. You can only buy them on their website. And when they're sold out, they're sold out. So So every Friday at 7, they have a new release color, and usually in about an hour, everything's sold out. So, and every time they come out with a color, I call them, I'm like, Jose, can you send me like 3 packs up to the shop? Oh, no, you have to go online and get them. All right. So I got a buddy that gets them sometimes, if there's a color that I absolutely have to have. Anybody have any other questions about the beach? All right. And when you're beach fishing this time of year, just find the schools of mullet. Find the schools of mullet, you'll find the fish. And that's the key. Find the schools of bait. Whether you're in Jupiter, here, or Sebastian, go to one access. If there's nothing, look for the birds. Drive down the beach. But if you can find where that school of bait is, that's usually where the fish are. Yes, sir.
Late question, is the tide better?
This time of year, if you're there right as the sun's coming up for about an hour or two, or right before the sun goes down for an hour or two, sometimes the tide doesn't matter. I like when the tide lines up, if it's high right around dark, or right as the sun's coming up. That's preferably. But not necessary this time of year. If there's mullet there, they could go off anytime. But if the tide's high at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, feel free to go at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and check it out if you're not doing anything. When I'm off work this time of year, if I'm not doing anything, I'll just ride it, tide's high at the beach, I'll ride over and check it out. Worst thing I do is hop back in the truck and leave, but there's been plenty of times that, and you know, you fish the beach a lot, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you ride down there, and Diane fishes a lot too. And you ride down to the beach there, and they're going off at 1 o'clock because the tide just started out. So, if you're not doing anything, don't be afraid to go look. And I'll pass this around. This is the NLBN paddle tail that he was talking about. And I'll get into that in my next part, but my next part is probably my favorite way to fish for snook. And these NLBNs work very, very good this way too, so I'll pass this around. And this rod, this is a medium heavy rod. I have 20-pound braid on this rod too. So a lot of people that know me know that I love throwing flare hawks or snook jigs, whatever you want to call it, for snook. That's my favorite way to fish them. This rod's a 15 to 40 pound rod. It's a Phoenix blade. It's a custom rod. And back to you asked about rod length. When you're throwing these jigs, if you're not in a boat, that's when the rod length becomes crucial, because especially if you go to Sebastian, you need to get out to where the fish are. If you're not reaching where the fish are, you're not getting fed. So this is an 8.5 foot rod. Some people use 9 foot. Some people use 9.2, which I think 9.2 is a little excessive. If you get the right length and the rod's made right, this 8.5 foot rod will outcast a few 9.5 foot rods. But I like the 8.5 because I can use it on the jetty, Sebastian, and also I can use it in a boat. 9 foot 2 rod in a boat, unless you really know what you're doing, is kind of frustrating, because you get the fish up to the boat, he's out there dancing, you got to walk to the other side of the boat because the guy trying to grab it or net it, it's like I can't reach. So if you have a long rod in the boat, remember that when you get the fish to the boat, walk to the other side of the boat, pull that fish in, so whoever's trying to grab it or net it can. But this is a First Light jig. Tom Lewis is a local guy. He's been making jigs for probably 50 years. He was the one, I used to play baseball with his son. And baseball practice, he used to have the Hickmans right down the street here. And before, we got barges all over the wall right here that you can't fish anymore. But they called that the wall. And he would go down at the end before work in the morning when the tide was coming in, and show up at baseball practice with 2 snook in the cooler every morning. He's like, dude, you gotta come throw jigs with me. So he got me on jigs when I was probably about 12 years old, maybe a little older, but this is my favorite way to fish for them. There's plenty of different ways, but I like throwing these jigs. When you hook a snook with one of these jigs, and Ty and a couple people can tell you, when they hit this thing, you know it. It's about yanks the rod out of your hand. And if sometimes they don't. Most of the time that you're gonna know. 90% of the time when they hit this, you're gonna know you have a snook. But that 10% of the time, you'll think your jig hits the bottom. When you come up, okay, I got a fish on here. I tell everybody that's disappointing if you catch a snook with one of these jigs and don't get the feeling hit it. But this is, I usually use 60 or 80 pound leader. This is 60 because it was convenient the other night. But when the water's dirty and you got a big jig like this, it doesn't matter. If If you use 80, you don't have to retie as much. Use 60, you get one good one, and if he gets it in his mouth right, you're gonna have to retie, and they'll even chafe through it sometimes. Some people use a loop knot, some people don't. I've used it both. I don't think it really matters. I know Tom Lewis doesn't use a loop knot. I got a buddy, Wes, he doesn't use a loop knot. We seem to catch about the same amount of fish. I think it's all in your head too. Yes, sir.
Do you have any success throwing that flare hawk on the beach?
You can catch them on the beach, but I would rather prefer to throw a plug, an NLBN, or a live bait on the beach than the flare hawk. So, but you can throw these off the catwalk, boat, everywhere. And this is 30-pound braid. Everybody's like, we get a lot of people that use 50-pound braid, come in our shop and use 50-pound braid, and everybody's like, why are you only using 30? Well, if you get wrapped around something with the 30 or 50, he's gonna break you off. And 30 will cast better. It'll get your jig down a little bit better than the 50 because it's a little bit thinner diameter if the current's ripping. And you just feel a little bit better with the 30 too. And actually this 30-pound, it's spider wire and Visibraid. When we put it on the machine to test it, it breaks at 52 pounds. We tested it. So even though it's 30, and that's with all the braids, they test higher than they say. So if you got 50, it's probably gonna break it close to 70 pounds. And plus, if you hook the bottom with one of these, you don't wanna break your reel trying to break it off. Yes, Joe?
I have a very good friend that works for Power Pro.
Okay?
As you know, there's no state records on any braid
No,
because it's underrated.
right.
He said on an average, any braid, add 10 pounds to it. If it's 30, it'll break at 40.
Yeah,
When it gets to 100, it's 5 pounds. So if you have a 100-pound test, it'll break at 105. It's just something that you might want to know. That's why there's no world records or anything on braid, because it's underrated.
yep, that is right. Most braids will break higher than they say they are. Yes, sir.
What is your retrieval on the LBM and the retrieval?
Okay, so on this, depends on where you're fishing. So if you're fishing off a catwalk, which a lot of people don't, certain people do, you're gonna wanna throw it up current. And when your jig hits the water, you just wanna reel and you just wanna twitch it. So throw up current and just reel, and every now and then twitch the rod tip like twice in a row like that. Don't quit reeling, because that jig's gonna come back at you with the current, and if you stop reeling, you're gonna hang the bottom and you're gonna have to break it off. So that goes for any catwalks, whether it's Jupiter here or Sebastian. Now you can throw it down current, but a lot of times if you're under the bridge, especially here or down in Stewart and Sebastian, throwing down current, you're gonna have to throw it under the bridge and have a really heavy lead to get you down to where those fish are. So everybody throws it up current as far as they can and just reels it. Now, that being said, if you're in a boat or you're at a different angle, you technically, say the tide's going this way, tide's going out. If you're anchored up at the fender or pillar at the bridge, you want to anchor up, I don't know, 50 yards, if there's not anybody around and you have it to yourself, 50 yards in front. And say the current's running this way, 12 o'clock to the back side of the room there. And you want your jig on the bottom at 12 o'clock. You want to land that jig about 2 o'clock. So when that jig gets to the bottom, it hits the bottom about 12 o'clock. And then just kind of let it sweep back in the shadow line, the fender, the dock, and then just pull it back to you really slow. And you want this jig, unless you're fishing the jetty or where there's a lot of rocks, and even with the jetty, you, on your initial cast, you want this jig to hit the bottom. Once you feel the bottom, you want to do a couple cranks, let it go back to the bottom, and let the current kind of sweep it, if you can. If you're at the jetty, you really don't want to do that unless you know where the rocks are, because you're going to hang the bottom. So I tell people at the jetty, if you go out there, count to 5 and then reel. And then just let it reel and do like 3 or 4 cranks, and then count to 2, and you won't hit the bottom. But if you're by bridges and stuff, in some areas that there's not much rocks, you want to let this hit the bottom, let it float, do a couple cranks, let it fall back down to the bottom, and pick it back up off the bottom. A lot of times those fish will hit it right when it's going to hit the bottom again, or right as you lift it up to come off the bottom. So that's being said with these jigs. And a little bit of advice, there's a lot of people that make snook jigs nowadays. They all work. I don't think there's one jig better than the other. There's certain jig heads that the heads are shaped different, which will fall better. I think that some nights will affect the bite on. But everybody's like, oh, my jig's better than yours, I catch more fish, blah, blah, blah. That's because you're tying them and you're fishing them all the time. That's why you don't fish so-and-so's jig. And we deal with this, 20 years ago, there was 3 people that make snook jigs. Now there's probably 30 people that make snook jigs. And when I pass this around, you'll see a lot of jigs in our shop that have 8/0 hooks on them. This jig actually has a 7/0 hook. I prefer to fish a 7/0 hook in my snook jigs because the 8/0 hook, it's a wider gap, also it's a thicker diameter hook. Everybody knows when they hook a snook, chances are he's gonna come up and start jumping. That 8/0 hook tends to wear a bigger hole in their mouth. And if you don't have that fish hooked really good, they will throw that 8/0 a lot more than they will the 7/0. The 7/0 doesn't leave a big hole in the mouth. If you catch us, I've caught plenty of snook with the 8/0 hook, big fish, and be glad you didn't come any slack, because that hook just wears a hole in the top of their mouth. 7/0 doesn't usually do that. Now, disadvantage of a lot of people come in, well, I bent the hook out of my 7/0. Well, yeah, you hooked the bottom, you're using 50-pound braid, and you went to break it off, you're gonna bend the hook out. And most of the time on a fish, you're not gonna bend this 7/0 out. Maybe a 100-pound tarpon, if you got it locked down, you're putting it to them, or a big Goliath, because we catch a lot of those at the jetty and the bridge. But on a snook, you're not gonna bend this 7/0 hook out unless he has it in the very top of the jaw perfectly. I think out all the years on a snook, I've bent a handful of hooks. And it was either the hook was bad or he was in the top of his jaw. So I will go ahead and pass this around.
Is that your favorite color?
So this is if there was one jig I had to use the rest of my life, clean water, dirty water, this is my favorite color, the chartreuse with blue. Now you could ask 15 people, they'll tell you different, but you could ask Tom Lewis, this is his favorite color. You can ask Gabe Thompson, who used to make the snook jigs before everybody, and Sebastian, this would be his favorite color, but he liked the orange head. But chartreuse and blue, a lot of the old time snook fishermen love that. And back to that, I don't think I've thrown a jig with a red tail in about 5 years, which I like the blue tail. It's just in my head. Have I caught fish with a jig with a red tail? Yes. But my preference is the blue tail. And back to the color, I'm glad you brought that up. When the water's really dirty, I tend to use chartreuse and blue. Now, when the water's been the last couple of weeks, it's been terrible dirty. So you want a brighter color. Now, if the water's crystal clear, you want to throw a white and blue or a white and pink. Works the best when the water's super clean. And sometimes when the water's super clean, I don't care. Snook have really good eyes. And when the water's crystal clear, chances are you might want to just go home. Because you could throw a live bait to them and they'll just sit there and look at you, especially if it's crystal clear and there's no wind. Go watch a football game or a baseball game or stay home, because chances are you're going to go and you won't catch much.
What's the weight?
This is a 2 ounce. So if I'm fishing around the bridges or in the turn basin here, or saying spots in Jupiter Inlet or Sebastian, I like a 2 ounce. If I go to the jetty, I tend to use a 2 ounce. A lot of people on the jetty will use 1.5 ounces. I tend to use a 2 ounce because I can cast a little bit further, and I've done it enough that I can get the retrieve down as if I was using a 1.5 ounce to sweep it like that. But I like the 2 ounce because I can get it out there further. I can always retrieve it faster with the 2 ounce. And I'll pass this around.
Are you fishing from the beach at Turning Basin or in a boat?
So right now, it's got to be from a boat or the catwalk here. Because the end of the street here where everybody fished for years and everybody knows, they're like, why do you tell everybody about the end of the street? Everybody knows about that now. Anybody from Fort Pierce. But they've got barges there, so you can't really go out and fish on it. the catwalk, we went to go out in the boat on Saturday night and, we had some issues with the lift that wouldn't work, so we got our drop net that I hadn't used in a while and went to the catwalk, and we had 4 fish and 2 of them were keepers, so.
How about the park?
The state park is very good. I will fish, if I'm fishing that jig, it's on the rocks into the inlet side at night, once it gets dark. And I like fishing that jig once it gets dark. You will this time of year, if the weather's really bad on a cloudy day, you'll have a tendency to catch a fish on those jigs, but mainly that is a dark, once it gets dark. You will catch them in the morning about an hour after the sun comes up on one of those. Some of my best mornings is when the tide's about dead in the turn basin here, right as the sun's coming up. It's not dark, but it's like right as that transition stage, works really good.
What about your retrieval on the NLBN?
So, okay, so I was just getting to the NLBN. All right, if you don't have confidence in one of those jigs, I would recommend the 5-inch NLBN. I make a 3-inch, a 3 1/4 inch now, and they make an 8-inch. They make paddle tails, they make they don't make twisty tails, but they make split tails. But the paddle tail is my favorite. And 2 years ago when we tested all these, we tried 8-inch, 5-inch, all of them. And when the tide's slow, certain times of the year around the bridges, you get the 1 ounce head with the 3-inch, it'll work okay. But we mainly try to use the 5-inch. So we experimented on them, and I think it's the action of the 5-inch is why they bite it so well, the 5-inch paddle tail. Now, we even experimented, we took the 8-inch paddle tail, cut it down to 5 inches, put it on a NLBN head, and threw that. That will not get bit as well as a regular 5-inch. The paddle tail on the 8-inch, it's a little different. You can see the shape of it is a little different. It doesn't give off the vibration that the 5-inch does. And that being said is, the water is dirty as it's been the last couple of weeks. We've had a swell, we've had the rain, we've had everything. So that water right now is just, you got sand, silt, fresh water, dirty as can be. When the water's like that, I really don't think the color of the NLBN matters, as long as you're throwing an NLBN. When we tested it in the water like we've had the last 2 weeks, and every time we would lose one, we would put a different color on. When the water was dirty, it did not matter what color NLBN we had on, as long as we had a 5-inch NLBN on. And I think that's because of the action and the vibration it gives off. Has anybody fished in a 5-inch NLBN? All right, so when you're reeling it in, you can feel it paddling, really good. How many other swim baits can you feel like that?
That's all I.
Yeah, exactly. That's all he uses. So a lot of the other swim baits, when you're reeling them in, you feel like drag and you feel like you have seaweed on it. It does not give the vibration off. Now, when the water's clean, I would recommend a chartreuse with a pearl belly. That's my favorite one. The pink works good too. On a full moon, if the water's clean, you want the purple because it casts like a silhouette. But back to the retrieve. Some people will work them just like one of these jigs. But the best way to retrieve one is to throw it down current, let it hit the bottom, and reel it steady just above the bottom. And you will crush it. So, Eric's been with me. I got a buddy that I would put him up throwing an NLBN up against anybody because he can't catch a fish with one of those jigs. I'll fish him 10 to 1, but put that NLBN on, and all I do is net his fish for him. It's like, all right, I'm like, what's going on here? And I'm sitting there trying to mimic it, but it's one of those, I don't have confidence in the NLBN. He does. So I'll pick this jig up, and he puts a clinic on, and he throws it out, and just like Jose from NLBN, I've watched him fish. Throw it out, down current, let it hit the bottom, and just reel it. Every now and then you can twitch it, and you can let it fall back to the bottom, but most of the time it's just a steady reel just above the bottom.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, how do you fish the inlet land base? Because I've thrown thumpers, jigs, NLBNs. I've thrown just about everything at every time of day, and I still haven't got bit at all. I've thrown all across the inlet, bottom, middle water. I've thrown just about every time, everywhere I could, and I still haven't caught a snook off the inlet yet.
Well, the last couple weeks has been very slow. It's been very frustrating. So if you fished the last few weeks, the water's still really warm for right now. It was Saturday or Sunday night, it was 78, which is better because a week ago it was 84 before we had that little bit of cool weather and the north wind. When you get a north wind this time of year, it'll cool the water off a little bit. But 78 is still a little warm for this time of year. Normally the water temperature is probably 75 right now. So there hasn't been many mullet around the last couple of weeks. I mean, there was mullet at the beach, and usually you go to the North Jetty this time of year, and even if there's not 10 million of them, you can find some up along the jetty. I was there 3 times 2 weeks ago and couldn't find a mullet anywhere.
Yeah.
That's kind of odd. So if you're fishing NLBN or something on the jetty, you can't really, you can throw it down current and bring it back up like I was saying. I just think the last couple weeks with the swell, the wind, everything we've had, there's a lot of things that coincided, and it's tough fishing. So
Where
if you
would you fish right now?
right now, if I was gonna fish land-based, I would probably go to South Jetty, fish the end of the spur jetty, or the very end of the jetty on the incoming tide.
Alright,
If you're not underwater, because the tide's been high,
yeah.
tide's been super, super high. Or I'd go to the catwalk on the incoming tide. So Saturday night, when we couldn't get the boat down, we went over there and fished. We fished from about 10:30 to about 1:45, right as the tide started coming in. And we had four bites. There was 3 other fish caught. There wasn't a great bite. There was fish there, which tells me the fish are there. They're just waiting for a front, some weather pattern to change, and they'll start biting really good. But if I was gonna go off land right now, I would probably go to the catwalk on the incoming tide.
Alright,
And when it calms down and you can get to the jetty, I would go to the jetty, because the jetty is really good this time of year. Or if you wanna get in your truck and drive an hour to Sebastian, they always catch fish up there. Sebastian Inlet is a lot better inlet than ours. They never dredge it, they've never dredged it, the inlet never changes. But be prepared to lose a lot of stuff if you go to Sebastian. Don't bring 2 jigs.
yeah, I've been up there also, and I still have yet to catch fish, and I've done every single thing I could too over the summer.
Right.
Just about every method I've looked up hasn't.
Was other people catching fish?
No, I only
Okay.
saw one snook caught there that whole expanse
All right,
too.
then it was slow, so.
Yeah.
Another big thing, if you're on the catwalk, the jetty, or anywhere, and there's a guy and he's crushing fish and you're not, don't go up and ask him, because chances are he's gonna laugh at you. Most of the people that snook fish aren't the nicest people around, especially on the jetty or the catwalk. Stand back for a minute, watch what he's doing. Watch the angle he's casting, watch where he's casting, watch how he's retrieving the jig, plug, whatever. Watch what he's doing, because obviously he's doing something, getting his bait, his lure, whatever you wanna call it, in the zone that those fish are, and presenting it a certain way. Because if those fish are wanting something presented a certain way, and you're not presenting it that way, snook's really picky, he's not gonna bite. I took somebody to Sebastian, a buddy's friend to Sebastian last year one night, and we got up there, and him and I were catching fish like crazy, and his buddy, we caught like 5 or 6 fish each in like 20 minutes, lost a couple, and his buddy hadn't even hooked one. So his buddy looks at me, I said, watch what we're doing. 10 minutes later, we each had 3 or 4 more fish, and they were chewing really well. And he goes, oh, it's the rock you're standing on. I said, I'll switch you rocks. Rocks was like 20 foot different. So I switched rocks with him, and I caught 2 fish, and he looked like a little school kid that had a bad day, because he was so grumpy. And I turned around and I said, dude, are you not watching what we're doing? And he just looked at me. I said, do you see the manatee sign on the other side of the inlet? He goes, yeah. I said, throw it 2 o'clock at that sign as far as you can, let your jig hit the bottom, reel it in 60 to 70 feet. If you don't have a bite, reel it in fast and rethrow it. His 5th cast, he caught one. He turned around, he looked at me, and goes, that's why you were reeling it in so fast. I'm like, yeah, those fish were sitting in one little spot, And if you hit that spot, you get bit. If you didn't hit that spot, you were not getting bit. So that's like antennas to the jetty here, the catwalk. If there's somebody that's catching fish, sit back for a minute or stand there and watch where he's throwing, where everything's landing, what he's doing, and then try to mimic what he's doing. It will work, especially if you go to Sebastian. Yes, sir.
You feel as though the moon has a big effect on snook like other fish?
I do. I don't like fishing around the full moon for 'em. So not saying I haven't fished on the full moon, because now I'm so busy when I get a few hours to fish, even if I don't think it's right, some nights I'll go, but I tend to not like to fish 2 or 3 days up to the full moon to 2 or 3 days after the full moon. Will I go? Yes. Do I expect much? No. And when I fish, a lot of times I will try, and this is just in general, I'll look when high tide is. I'll try to fish like 2 hours before the tide's high and about 2 hours after the tide's high. And a lot of times I'll go fish for an hour or two. If those fish aren't biting, try a handful of spots, I'm gonna go home. If I don't think the bite's gonna turn on. If I think the bite's gonna turn on, I'll stay. But if I go and the conditions aren't right, I'm not feeling it, there's been too many nights where I listen to friends, oh, let's stay, they're gonna bite. And I know we should just go home and get some sleep. And so, yeah, a little bit older and a little bit wiser now. So I try to tend to find out when the tide's high, fish about an hour or two before, about an hour or two after. Because especially this time of year, in that middle of that tide, that current is running so hard that unless you're getting behind a piling out of the current or something that creates an eddy in the current, a lot of times it's gonna be hard to present a bait to those fish right. And then you can even find out when low tide is. You fish a little bit before low tide and a little bit after. You wanna try to fish when the current's not running the hardest. But the moon does have a lot to do with it, and especially like last month, we had that full moon and it was so bright. I did fish the night of it. We caught 2 shorts, that was it. But I went because it was convenient. I wouldn't have went, but I haven't been, and it was like, I didn't expect much. I call it a boat ride. Yes, sir.
Is there a particular app that puts you on to when the tide is high or low, like at Jensen Beach Causeway?
So there's a lot of different apps.
Yeah.
And my experience with apps, they don't have certain variables,
Okay.
so they're not 100% right. But they give you an idea. So if the wind's blowing a little harder out of the east, the tide might be high, but you're still gonna get the wind pushing water in and stuff. That being said, it could be 45 minutes to an hour different. So like here, high tide at the jetty is about an hour before it is at Southbridge.
Okay.
And then, say about 2 hours to the Northbridge. The tide will switch to start going out at Southbridge about an hour before it starts going out at Northbridge.
Okay. And is there a rule if you get down in the Jensen Beach area?
So down in Jensen Beach, I would say if tide is about probably 2 hours difference from up here, but you can, oh gosh, I can't think of the app my buddy uses.
I use saltwatertides.com.
So saltwatertides.com is what my buddy Wes uses on his phone. And that's probably one of the most accurate ones there is.
And if you get the tide chart from a South Bait Shop, Snook Nook gives out tide charts. You deduct for the Jensen Beach Causeway 2 hours.
Yep.
It's a 2-hour differential.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You mentioned Sebastian, just for those that like to fish up there, I don't know what the impact's gonna be. Starting next year, DOT's replacing that bridge.
Yep. Yep. No, I know they've got the catwalk, I think on the south side closed right now. So a lot of people will fish on the North Jetty up there. And a little bit of advice, if you walk out that North Jetty in Sebastian at night, walk to the north side of the jetty if the tide's going out, because a lot of people throwing these jigs are not the brightest and they do not pay attention when they turn around to cast them. You don't want to be that guy that walks into somebody throwing a 2-ounce jig, because I've seen 2 people hooked in the forehead and it's not pretty. And back in the back.
Yeah, just asking kind of for a friend.
Okay.
We happen to live about 3 miles south of Fort Pierce, that Indian River right here with this 300-foot dock.
Okay.
What would be your favorite time to fish and your favorite lure to use when you walk down to the dock with a cup of coffee?
Are is it still dark and you have a dock light?
No, it's not dark.
Okay. All right, so if it was dark and you had a dock light, I would just go down there different times and check it out. Preferably around high tide would probably be your best. And you saw that plug that I had on the one rod, that fingerling?
Yes.
If you were fishing at night in a dock light, I would throw that in the dock light. Throw it in the shadow line. And don't be afraid to reel that as fast as you can through that light. Because a lot of those fish in that light, it's gonna be a reaction bite. You throw it, that lure, it's really shiny, it'll glow off that light, and those fish will hit it as a reaction bite. If you pull it too slow, they'll okay, this isn't a real bait, but if you throw it out there and just rip it through that light on the outside of it, they'll hit it. But this time of year, on a 300-foot dock, if you're probably right as the sun's coming up, if you're drinking coffee, I would take a topwater plug like a jumping minnow or a Zara spook, about a 4-inch topwater plug, and put that on my rod, and I would fish that this time of year.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do you feel the tidal coefficients play any role in the snook bite itself?
What was that?
Do you feel the tidal coefficient, the amount of water that's moving, plays a role in the snook bite itself?
Lately, I don't usually think it does. It just, when we get more water in, the tide tends to run a little bit harder. So I try to concentrate on the start of the tide and the end of the tide when it's like that. It's just, we have more water in, it tends the tide to run a little bit harder in the middle of the tide. You don't want to fish in that middle of the tide. On a normal night, when we have normal tides, you can sometimes, if the wind's not blowing real hard, you can get away with fishing in that middle of the tide. But lately, once that tide has started running, you get about 2 hours or 2.5 hours into it, until about an hour before it changes, it's gonna be hauling butt. Like the other night, we were sitting at the bridge and the trolling motor was on 10. It was like, all right, we're going somewhere else because trolling motor should be on 10 here, and there's no way a fish is gonna swim in that. But tide, we were at Northbridge, tide was going out, we had a 20 knot north wind with it, so it was just ripping. So when we get something like that, I like the harder the wind usually, the better I like it, because a lot of times snook don't like calm weather. Plus, when the wind's blowing 20 knots, the normal person's not gonna go, so you have a lot of your spots to yourself. But that being said, if current's ripping out and we got a 20 knot north wind, North Bridge is gonna be hard to fish. I tend to come to South Bridge because the wind and the current are against each other, chops it up more, tends not to run as hard, and usually snook like it super, super choppy. Then go back to the North Bridge on incoming tide. Yes, sir.
Off topic, you catching any bluefish off the beach?
So I heard today somebody caught a lot of bluefish off the beach. The mullet, I would say the last 4 days, we've got a pretty good wave of mullet. Got off work last night and wanted to hit the beach last night, but I had a couple customers come in right at 6 and I didn't get out of there till 6:45. By the time I would get to the beach, it would have been dark, so I didn't make it, but my buddy said it was very good last night. And they caught a lot of bluefish out at the end of the South Jetty this morning, right as the sun was coming up.
About earlier this year?
Haven't really heard much enough.
Me neither.
So,
Nada.
does anybody have any other questions? Yes, sir.
It's kind of a different question, but you've been around forever, so you're the man to ask.
Okay. Hopefully I can answer it.
Have you ever heard of anybody ever having any issues with ciguatera on any of these offshore treasure coast reefs?
I haven't heard much. Maybe Brandon could answer that a little better.
Yes, I've
Sorry, Brandon, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I know you dive and.
so I've commercial spearfish my whole life and kill a lot of fish, a lot of markets and everything like that. And the quick answer is no. You're looking. Get down close to Keys. I've heard of fish that come up, get sold in markets here. Go inside, they call it seafood, had a lawsuit like 15 years ago. Where someone got over on it, they traced that fish back to tell us a 100-pound neighbor came out.
Yeah, it came out of Bahamas. People got real.
But
also, that being said, I don't know how many times, Taylor Creek this time of year is really good with all the rain we had in the spillway, and you can catch a lot of big snook in Taylor Creek this time of year. And you can fish the jigs, NLBNs. But people ask me, would you eat a snook out of Taylor Creek? And I said, yes, I would. And they look at me funny. On that water? I'm like, well, chances are that snook hasn't been up there very long. And I tell him it's probably better than a lot of stuff you go buy at the grocery store. But he goes, well, it's in that nasty water. And I said, I think I've had 2 snook out of all my years cleaning snook where I did not, I fed it to the catfish because something wasn't right with it. They looked okay. One I caught in Sebastian, one I caught at the jetty here. And fish looked fine. I started cleaning it, and the meat was just absolute mush on both sides. Something wasn't right with
He
it.
was up by
So-
the nuclear plant.
And, but what I tell people is, I make my own judgment. When I clean a snook, I've ate a lot of snook that have came from Taylor Creek, especially right up by the spillway. I've never had any issues. But if I'm cleaning, and that's with any fish, if I'm cleaning a fish and the meat's mush or something doesn't seem right with it, I'm gonna feed it to the catfish or feed it to something else. I'm not gonna, and snook, in all my years of catching snook, I've only ever had 2 that, and they were, probably 5 years ago was the last time I caught that one in Sebastian. And that being said, a lot of people like fishing live bait for snook too. I will do that during the day if I have to. If somebody wants to catch one during the day, most time during the day, live bait's your best bet. And I can tell you a little bit of advice. If you have a chance to get croakers, pinfish, or pigfish right now, get the pinfish or the pigfish. They'll outfish a croaker 10 to 1 right now. And I think that is because back in the day, nobody had croakers. You weren't getting a croaker unless you went and caught them yourself. Now, every bait shop, 4 bait guys sell croakers. And the last couple of years, and I've got a couple buddies that are guides, they would rather use a pigfish or a pinfish because everybody is throwing a croaker to a snook now around here. And you'll still catch them with a croaker, but if I showed up with a croaker and you showed up with a pinfish, you're gonna outfish me 10 to 1.
Somebody's never snook fished in their life. What would be like your go-to advice?
My go-to advice around here?
He has a pen off his dock in his yard.
That I do. So there's about 50 blue runners in it right now, but if I was gonna do that right now, I would find out when the tide's coming in, get you some pinfish, and go sit along those barges right here in the Hermes. But put a 2-ounce lead, use a 3-foot leader, put a swivel, put a hook, put the 2 ounce above the swivel, let it slide down to your swivel, and drop it to the bottom on the incoming tide around those barges and boats right there. Yes, sir.
When you're fishing those pinfish, are you supposed to cut the dorsal fin?
Some people do, I don't. My hand's all swelled up when I get done, because they'll stick you, they'll do everything, and people will cut the dorsal off. I don't, I just hook them in. People do that to a pigfish too, it says make them drown a little more, but I've done it, and I don't know, I just ground them and put them out.
Through the
Some people will
nose.
put a rubber band on a pigfish, because when you, if you ever notice, when you squeeze a pigfish, he starts grunting. So some people will put a rubber band on them to keep them grunting when you put them back.
Top secret.
Yep.
It's easy to swallow.
And most of the time, if you're using live bait, a jig, a snook's not like a snapper or any other fish. He's not gonna like, okay, I've got him. When a snook hits something, he hits it and you either hooked him or you didn't hook him. It's one of those where, okay, he hits you, if you missed him, especially if you're using a live bait, check and make, a lot of people can tell if their bait's there, but chances are, if he hits you hard with a live bait, chances are that bait's gone, so.
What size hook and how do you hook them?
Use a 4 or 5-aught, depending on how big the baits are. If I'm using croakers, I like the 5-aught, because the croaker, you have to hook them up in the mouth a little bit. The gap's a little bit more than a pinfish or a pigfish. Usually use a 4-aught with those, and hook them right up through the top lip, most of the time. Now, if I'm fishing around the dock light with no lead and I want them to swim down, I'll hook them in the tail, because if you throw them up under that dock light and the bait's hooked in the tail and you twitch it, that bait's gonna tend to swim away from you. So you can throw it up there, twitch it, and he'll swim hopefully right underneath the dock. Because if there's fish sitting under the dock, you don't wanna throw that bait on top of their head, because it'll scare them. You wanna throw it up there and hopefully that bait can go by them or swim towards them. Yes, sir.
You know, years ago, they used to call snook soapfish.
They did.
And I believe, if I heard correct, that's because people used to cook them with the skin on.
Yes, sir.
And then they realized you've gotta take the skin off, that's true?
I never try to snook with skin on, but I would definitely take the skin off, and also, if you catch one and you're gonna eat him, I would recommend bleeding him, cut his throat, pop him, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. Preferably if you're in a boat, get your live well going, cut their throat or bleed them in the live well, and it'll flush everything out. If you're on land, just cut their throat, but if you have a snook that this throat is not cut, and clean it, it's still gonna taste good, but the meat, it's like a little pinkish tint to it. That's because you didn't bleed them. If you bleed one the right way and you go to clean them, that meat is gonna be really white, almost like certain groupers.
And if the fillet is really thick, or cut it in half, otherwise when you cook it, it can get rubbery. Have you heard that?
Well, yeah, but that was back in the day when you could keep a big fish. So back in the day, they had 3 different regulations on snook. It used to be 18 inches, and then it was 24 inches to 34 inches, 2 fish, one over 34. And then they made it 26 to 34 with 1 over 34, and then they made it 28 to 32. So if you get one that's chewy right now, chances are he was not in the little, he was a little bigger. But if you are eating a bigger fish like that, cut it, like you said, cut it in little chunks, he won't taste as chewy. But back in the day, even when you could keep a big one, if you get one over about 34 inches, he doesn't taste very good.
No.
So the best eating size is the 4-inch slot they give you, which, wish they would have had it 34, which the FWC back to the asking people, and sometimes they do what they wanna do, but I researched, I think it's like 21 years ago now, with Jim Whittington. He used to be the head scientist for the state of Florida for the snook. We did a lot of research. 2 nights, we tagged, I think it was 93 snook in the term basin in December, in 2 nights. But he did a lot of research. We do not have a problem with our snook population. And if it was up to their staff, we'd still be allowed to keep 2 fish from 28 to 34.
They're temperature sensitive, so how far north can we go?
They are temperature sensitive, but a lot of people have fished the river and bridges, and yes, it's not technically as good as it used to be around here. That's because a lot of things have changed. A lot of the old snook holes we caught snook at by this bridge, when they redid our marina and put these rock islands in, have filled in. It used to be 20-some feet, now they're 8 feet. The current doesn't run through there. They dredged our turn basin. So there's fish here, and over the last few years, a lot of that population of snook is offshore, and they're not even coming back into the river and inlets to spawn. That's where a lot of people say, oh, we're not catching snook inside. There's gotta be a problem with it. Our snook population is the best we've ever had, and they're finding that these fish are on the offshore reefs, 60, 80, 90 foot of water. They're spawning out there, they're staying out there, and they're not even coming back in. And I know a couple of people in this room can attest to that, especially that dive. And I mean, 20 years ago, Brandon, we'd go snapper fishing at night. 10 trips, we might catch 1 or 2 snook. Now it's about every trip we're gonna catch a snook.
I just see big schools of it too,
Yeah.
especially like on the clubs, like they have oranges, and then some right at home, like there's big schools of stuff. They'll literally turn the wall, what it is, and it's very Kadri. There'll be a school that's halfway surface. Big school.
So if you hear somebody say we have a problem with our snook population, they're not catching any, we do not have a problem. Our East Coast population, our West Coast population is the best it's ever been. So, they do their study on the SPR, the spawning rate to the mortality rate. As long as it's over 20%, our population is good. The last 2 years, it's 55%. So, we're doing very good on the snook.
You mentioned that the grass is getting better, and so that the trout fishing is better.
Yes, sir.
grass getting better up there also?
I don't know about that far. I know around this area, the grass is coming back. So except on the west side of the river south, for some reason, it's not came back there, but Bear Point up north, both sides, came back in the last.
Have anything to do with the runoff? They haven't been dumping the lake.
They haven't been dumping the lake. It'll be curious to see. Hopefully we don't get a hurricane, but after the rain we've had the last few weeks and everything's been dumping, it's curious to see what's gonna happen. So.
I'm down on the North Fork of St. Lucie, and of course, that's the dump, river. But when they do dump through the St. Lucie River, does that really affect you this far up or not?
The St. Lucie River, when they're dumping down there, it doesn't affect us. Our runoff comes from Tiller Creek, and that's not from the lake. A lot of people think ours is from the lake. That's from a lot of the runoffs and canals out west of town. So we don't get a lot of that algae and stuff that they do down. Joe?
But the Taylor Creek has been running for a month, heavy.
Oh, it has.
Yeah, real heavy.
Yes, it has.
Cause I keep my boat at Taylor Creek
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's ripping.
Oh, it's, you
You
go
know,
out.
so they're dumping water from somewhere.
Oh, they're dumping, it's the canals out west of town and all the runoff out west of town. That's where we get our water from, not the lake.
So I love snook fishing, that's my passion, and they're like pets to me, I don't kill them, but when you were talking about bleeding them out, I seen a guy reach in through the gills.
Yeah.
Can you bleed it, does that?
So, you reach in through the gills, there's a vein, and you can just pull that and it will pop them and it will bleed them out.
And that's sufficient?
So technically, I'd rather cut it with a knife, but technically from an FWC officer at Sebastian Inlet, which those are the people that got up on the wrong side of the bed every day, which most of them are, if you cut it with a knife, it makes them bigger. So, if I go to Sebastian, I'll pop them just because, but if I'm here, I usually keep them in my live well till I pull the boat out of the trailer or get back to the house, and I'll just slice their throat with a knife, because if you get it with a knife, you're gonna get, you got them good, so. But you can reach down in their gills and pop it. So if you go to Sebastian, I'd recommend doing it that way, because a lot of those people up there are not the nicest people to deal with.
Carry your measuring device.
Yes, and carry your, this was 10 years ago. Me and a buddy were always up there, and I got an Asian buddy, and a couple people know him in this room, but he's the funniest person ever. We walked by, there was a DEP officer, not an FWC, DEP officer that, I think they were just upset because when they were not working, they couldn't catch a snook. We'd offer to give them snook when they were biting and they wouldn't take one, but they measured every single thing. And they'd always measure our fish. We've never had any issues with them. So one night we walked by, it was like 1 in the morning, and my buddy Lime goes, "That's odd." The guy's name was Joey, didn't check our stuff. I'm like, "Yeah, it is." So we fired in the back of the truck, we're going to pull out. He lights us up right at the gate. And we pulled over and we're like, "Dude, what's up?" He goes, "We gotta measure your fish." I'm like, "We just walked by your truck. You gotta make it look like we're doing something wrong."
He was looking to see if you had stacked more in the
I
truck
said-
earlier.
I said, "You don't wanna do that, Sebastian, because they are up there."
I don't kill
But-
stuff.
They have their undercover guys up there big
I said,
time.
"You had to make it look like we were doing something wrong." He goes, "I gotta measure your fish." I'm like, "Well, they're in the back of the truck. Go ahead." He goes, "Do you guys have a ruler?" I said, "You're supposed to have the ruler." And he goes, "Well, I forgot it tonight." And I said, "I don't." I said, "I was leaving, I left my ruler with my buddy, he's out on the jetty, I'm not going back out to the jetty because he forgot his to measure these fish." I said, "You know us, how many times have you measured these snook? And obviously, if you've seen so many snook, you can eyeball them and see." I said, "They're good." And he let us go. The next night, he was sitting in his truck, we parked right next to him again. On the way back, we threw our fish in the truck and he didn't get out. My little Asian buddy knocked on the door and said, "Hey, can you get out and measure our fish? Here's our ruler." He didn't top it off. He said, "Can you write us a permission slip so we don't get pulled over on the way home?" But then also back to the ruler, is there's a lot of different rulers out there now. And I had this happen to me at Sebastian one night. So try to, if you measure a snook with that ruler, when they measure it, yeah, they're supposed to have a ruler, but if something's off, make sure that you measure them on the ruler that you had, because everybody knows the Florida Sportsman sticks back in the day where they folded up. Does anybody remember those?
I still have them.
Okay, so it was convenient because you could put it in your pocket when you're going out on the jetty.
Yeah.
So my buddy Wes and I go to Sebastian, and we catch 2 fish that on the ruler was right at 32 inches with the tail fish. We get back to the truck, we get stopped, we figured we were gonna get stopped. He measures them, and the first one's 33. And I'm like, there's no way. He goes, fish is 33. He measures my buddy's Wes, and he's 33. And we're like, dude, these fish are 32. I said, we measured them on this ruler. So he pulls it out, he puts it on that ruler, they were 32. So the Florida Sportsman ruler was an inch off. So he let us go that night. And I said, can I have my ruler back? He goes, no, I'm keeping this one. I was like, darn it. But now they make the gator boards. They make them red and blue. It's a metal board. Most of those are very accurate. I keep one in my truck, I keep one in the boat, and I keep an extra one at home, but you just slide the nose up there and put them on that, and those are very, very accurate. But that being said, when FWC stops me, I said, this is the ruler I used them, use this ruler. And if we have any issues, then we can use yours. But I like to make sure they measure it with the same ruler that I measure if there's any questions. But there's one guy here in town that's really cool. As long as you're not a douche to him, he's not a douche to you. He's stopped me plenty of times, and a lot of times he's sitting there with night vision watching you. I mean, he stopped us the other night. He was in the turn basin without any lights on, watching us at the bridge. And he goes, you guys got any fish? I said, well, why don't you tell me? And he looked, he goes, you knew I was watching? I said, I saw you pull over there. I said, we caught 4, and how many did we put in the well? He goes, 1. And I said, the fish was 31. So I opened the well. I said, you want me to get it out and measure it? He goes, no, you guys are good. So, but most of the time, if the guy's seen a snook FWC, unless it's close, he's not gonna have you pull it out and measure it. Or at least the couple around here that I've dealt with. Once you've seen enough snook, you can eyeball. Like the other night at the catwalk, I guessed 4, and they were all 4 exactly right, give or take a quarter of an inch. And the one guy was like, man, I've seen thousands of snook. Yes, sir.
So do you keep your snook, if you keep them live in the live well until you get back?
If I usually do keep them live in the live well till I get back. So.
That way you can cull them too. If you get a bigger one, you can.
Well, yeah, sometimes, but usually if I get my limit, I'm heading to the house. Unless they're chewing really good, then I'll fish for a bigger one. But most of the time usually I go fishing with a buddy. Usually we get our 2 fish, we're happy, because I've done it plenty of times where I've got there, first cast, catch one that's 28 1/4, let him go, okay, we're on a bite, then not catch another fish rest of the night. Like, damn, I should have put him in the live well. So, yeah, if they're on a really good bite, we get a 28, then we might wait till we catch one bigger and let that one go. But I don't, if I'm in the boat, I won't kill any of my fish till I get home or put the boat on the trailer. So, just in case, I mean, if you have one that's close, it's just 32, I'd recommend keeping them alive, because when you put them in the live on stuff, sometimes they stretch. And also, if you're on the jetty and you get one that's just 28, don't leave that fish sit out for more than 20 minutes, because he will dry out, he will shrink, and then he'll be 27 1/4 when the guy comes up and measures it. So.
You know, now with the new rules out about FWC can't just pull anybody over without.
They'll find an excuse to pull you over.
So
Whether
that
your ankle,
doesn't apply.
don't apply that. Expect them to pull you over, and if they don't, you're doing good. And every time I go out and I see one, I expect him to pull me over.
So they see a fishing rod or anything, they can come up with something.
Your way.
Yeah.
Okay.
They can.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if they want to, that's a thin line.
So, and I'm usually nice to them, but there's, not recently, but like 10 years ago, I asked one of the guys at the bridge one night when he stopped me if he was the kid that got picked on in high school, and if he was gonna write me a ticket, just write me a ticket so I could get back to fishing. So, yeah. I really thought I was getting a ticket that night. He just told me to have a good evening after I said that, but he had pulled me over to do a safety check right when the fish started biting. When he sat there, while we were sitting there not fishing for 30 minutes when he could have came over and did a safety check, we catch 2 fish. The fish were gonna bite for about 30 minutes. comes over and says, oh, we're gonna have to do a safety check right now, and I said, really? And he goes, yeah. And I was not a happy camper at the time, and he's like, I can do this, I can do that, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, can you either just write me the ticket and get back to fishing, or like, what's going on here? Just do what you wanna do and then let us go. Any other questions?
Kadri, real quick, also get back to the fleet. I don't know if anyone's been down Ski Road or anything, out west of town. They are actively building water retention out there, the water farm, to hold water back from the canal instead of letting it flow out here.
Yes.
It's in progress, I'm sure it's at least a few years away from operation.
Yeah, that's actually, I think it's 2 years away for they're finally done, but yes, that'll be rerouted, and I think that will help our seagrass in our river very well. I know the grasses came back by your place, Brandon.
Yeah, so it's
Over watch.
Talking about that grass, anybody interested, I'm on the west side of here on Main Road, I permitted through DEP and had probably about 7 different pens that MOA planted there. 95% of it died, and they went and checked, and there was a lot of temperature related and wave action. So they're trying to research some of the grass types, see about the rehabilitation with maybe a little more temperature tolerant grass.
Oh,
And
that's
which-
good to know.
And which, that's kinda odd, I thought maybe it was something from the runoff on the drive and the sand or something, because it's odd that there's grass at Bear Point, but you go directly across the river and it's a desert.
Yeah,
So, but up north in the river on the west side, it's came back like crazy.
Coming out of Little Mud, there was a lot of, like, literally right coming out of Little Mud, there was a lot of tall grass. And then we went to, south and north of there, and it was minimal, if any.
Right.
That was my first time in years coming up here. I had a bad experience coming up here with this guy. We had 4 police,